Opening shot of a quaint, small town surrounded by dense woods. Hello and welcome to Shadowlands Ghosts. I'm your host, Raven Blackwood. I've always been drawn to the darker corners of our world, the places where the fabric of reality seems to unravel. This channel is a reflection of that curiosity, a journey into the heart of darkness that lies just beyond the edge of town. As a storyteller, I've always been fascinated by the power of a well-crafted tale to transport us to another world, to make us feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And that's exactly what we'll be doing here on Shadowlands Ghosts. Tonight, we're going to take you on a journey to a place that's been shrouded in mystery for decades. An abandoned asylum, once home to the most troubled minds in the country, has been sending out a strange invitation, postcards with no return address, inviting people to stay overnight. The locals claim it's a prank, a cruel joke played by some bored teenagers. But I think there's more to it than that. As we delve deeper into this story, you'll be hearing it from the perspective of Emily, a brave and curious individual who decided to take the asylum up on its offer. She's going to take you on a journey through the crumbling halls, the abandoned wards, and the dark secrets that lie within. And I have to warn you, what she finds may stay with you long after the story is over. So if you're ready to join us on this journey into the heart of darkness, be sure to subscribe to Shadowlands Ghosts. Join our family, and together, let's explore the shadows that lurk just beyond the edge of town. I stepped off the bus and onto the cracked asphalt of the deserted road, the only sound being the creaking of old trees swaying in the gentle breeze. The sign that read, "Welcome to Ashwood," hung crookedly from a rusty pole, as if it was trying to escape the gravity that held it in place. I had always been drawn to places like this, quaint towns with secrets hidden behind the facade of normalcy. And Ashwood was no exception. As I made my way down the main street, I couldn't help but notice the curious glances of the locals. They seemed friendly enough, but there was a hint of wariness in their eyes, a sense that I was an outsider who didn't belong. I had been invited to stay overnight in the infamous Ashwood Asylum, an abandoned monstrosity that loomed on the outskirts of town. The postcard had arrived unexpectedly, with no return address and no indication of who might have sent it. The locals claimed it was a prank, but I sensed there was more to it. I stopped at the local diner to gather my thoughts and grab a cup of coffee. The waitress, a friendly woman named Sarah, chatted with me about the weather and the latest town gossip. But when I mentioned the asylum, her demeanor changed. She leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not really going to stay there, are you?" she asked, her eyes wide with concern. I nodded, and she shook her head. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," she said, her voice laced with a hint of warning. I smiled and thanked her for her concern, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something sinister. As I finished my coffee and prepared to leave, I caught a glimpse of the asylum in the distance. Its towering spires and crumbling walls seemed to loom over the town, casting a long shadow that stretched and twisted in the fading light. I took a deep breath, feeling a thrill of excitement mixed with a hint of fear. I was about to uncover the secrets of Ashwood Asylum, and I had a feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. As I stepped out of the diner, the evening air clung to me like a damp shroud. The once clear sky had given way to a deep, foreboding gray, as if night was falling prematurely. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and the weight of Sarah's warning lingered in my mind. I quickened my pace, my footsteps echoing off the deserted buildings as I made my way towards the asylum. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches creaking in an unsettling rhythm. Every step felt like a countdown, each one drawing me closer to the asylum's imposing facade. I could feel the locals' eyes on me, their whispers carried on the wind. The words themselves were indistinguishable, but the malevolent intent was unmistakable. As I approached the asylum's entrance, a chill ran down my spine. The massive wooden doors hung crookedly on their hinges, as if they had been pushed open by some unseen force. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Something didn't feel right. The air around me seemed to thicken, growing heavy with an unspoken presence. I pushed the doors open, and a faint whisper seemed to caress my ears. It was a soft, raspy voice, speaking words I couldn't quite decipher. The sound sent shivers down my spine, and I spun around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I stepped inside, my eyes adjusting to the dim light within. The air inside was stale and musty, reeking of decay and neglect. Cobwebs clung to the walls, and the shadows seemed to writhe like living things. I fumbled for my flashlight and turned it on, casting a weak beam of light down the deserted hallway. As I ventured deeper into the asylum, I began to notice strange symbols etched into the walls. They seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they were watching me, waiting for me to make a wrong move. I felt a growing sense of unease, my skin crawling with every step. Suddenly, I heard the creaking of a door, followed by the faint sound of footsteps. They were light, almost imperceptible, but they seemed to be coming from the floor above. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who, or what, was up there? I took a deep breath and began to climb the stairs, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The footsteps grew louder, more insistent, and I could feel a presence closing in around me. I reached the top of the stairs and pushed open the door, my heart racing with anticipation. The room was empty, but the air was thick with an unseen presence. I could feel eyes on me, boring into my skin. And then I saw it, a message scrawled on the wall, in letters that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. "Welcome to Ashwood," it read. "You'll never leave." I spun around, but I was alone. The presence seemed to coalesce around me, a cold, malignant force that seemed to seep into my bones. I knew then that I was in grave danger, and that I had to get out of the asylum before it was too late. But as I turned to flee, I realized that the door was no longer there. The wall had shifted, sealing me inside. I was trapped, and I was not alone. As I stood frozen in terror, the message on the wall seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if it was alive and feeding off my fear. The words "Welcome to Ashwood" appeared to shift and twist, like a snake slithering through the grass, and the phrase "You'll never leave" seemed to echo in my mind, a cold, mirthless laughter that sent shivers down my spine. The presence closed in around me, a suffocating shroud of darkness that seemed to seep into my bones, chilling me to the marrow. I could feel the weight of the asylum's dark history bearing down on me, the accumulated suffering and despair of the countless souls who had been trapped within these walls. And then I saw them. The shadows on the walls seemed to coalesce into figures, twisted and grotesque, their eyes glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. They seemed to be watching me, waiting for me to make a wrong move, and I knew that I was in grave danger. The air grew colder, the silence more oppressive, as the figures began to move closer, their eyes fixed on me with an unspeakable hunger. I tried to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot, unable to move as the darkness closed in around me. I realized then that the asylum was not just a building. It was a living, breathing entity, a monster that had been awakened by my presence. And I was its next victim. The message on the wall seemed to be the final nail in the coffin, a cold, calculated warning that I had stumbled into a place where I was not welcome. And now, I was trapped, alone and defenseless, at the mercy of the asylum's dark and malevolent forces. As the shadows closed in around me, I knew that I was doomed, trapped in a living nightmare from which I might never awaken. The asylum had me in its grasp, and it would never let me go. As the shadows closed in around me, their twisted faces seemed to stretch and contort, like reflections in a funhouse mirror. I felt a presence looming behind me, a cold breath on the back of my neck, and I knew that I was about to face the master of the asylum's horrors. I spun around, my heart racing with anticipation, and that's when I saw it. The figure of the asylum's former administrator, Dr. Malcolm, standing in front of me with a twisted grin spreading across his face. His eyes seemed to burn with an otherworldly intensity, a cold, calculating intelligence that seemed to bore into my very soul. "Welcome to Ashwood," he said, his voice dripping with malevolence. "You'll never leave." As he spoke, the shadows seemed to coalesce around him, forming a dark, amorphous mass that pulsed and throbbed with a life of its own. I felt the air grow colder, the silence more oppressive, as the darkness closed in around me. Dr. Malcolm took a step closer, his grin growing wider, and I saw that his eyes were not just eyes. They were windows into a realm of madness and terror, a portal to a world of unspeakable horrors. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. I tried to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. I was trapped, alone and defenseless, at the mercy of the asylum's dark and malevolent forces. Dr. Malcolm reached out a hand, his fingers closing around my wrist like a vice. I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body, a shockwave of fear that seemed to rip through my very being. And then everything went black. As I fell into the darkness, I heard Dr. Malcolm's voice, echoing in my mind, "You'll never leave Ashwood. You'll never be free." The last thing I remembered was the feeling of the asylum's dark energy closing in around me, a suffocating shroud of terror that seemed to seep into my bones and chill me to the marrow. I was consumed by the darkness, trapped in a living nightmare from which I might never awaken. The asylum had me in its grasp, and it would never let me go. As I slowly regained consciousness, I found myself back in my room at Ashwood Asylum, the same room I had been trying to escape from for what felt like an eternity. But something was different. The shadows seemed to have receded, and the air felt thick with an eerie silence. I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back onto the bed. As I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I tried to call out, but my voice was barely a whisper. The silence was oppressive, and I felt like I was suffocating under its weight. I struggled to piece together what had happened after Dr. Malcolm's voice had faded into the darkness. Had I been taken somewhere? Had I been subjected to some twisted experiment? The memories seemed to be shrouded in a thick, impenetrable fog. As the minutes ticked by, the silence began to take on a life of its own. I started to feel a creeping sense of dread, a feeling that I was being herded towards some unknown fate. I knew I had to get out of there, but my body seemed to be weighed down by some unseen force. I finally managed to sit up, and my eyes scanned the room frantically for any sign of escape. But the door was locked, and the windows refused to budge. I was trapped. And then I heard it. A faint whispering in my ear, a soft, raspy voice that seemed to be coming from all around me. "You'll never leave Ashwood," it said over and over again. "You'll never be free." I knew then that I was doomed. The asylum had me in its grasp, and it would never let me go. I was a prisoner of my own fears, trapped in a living nightmare from which I might never awaken. As the whispering grew louder, I felt my mind begin to unravel. I was consumed by a creeping sense of madness, a feeling that I was losing myself to the darkness. And then, the darkness closed in around me once again. I was gone, lost in a sea of terror and despair. The last thing I remembered was the sound of my own screams, echoing through the corridors of Ashwood Asylum. The next morning, the asylum staff found me curled up in a ball, my eyes vacant and my mind shattered. I was never the same again, trapped in a world of madness and terror, forever bound to the dark and malevolent forces that lurked within the walls of Ashwood Asylum. The asylum had claimed another victim, and I was lost forever in its depths. The darkness had consumed me, and I was never to be seen again. The years that followed were shrouded in silence. I became a shadow of my former self, a mere specter of a person, lost in the dark recesses of my own mind. The asylum staff would occasionally report seeing me wandering the corridors, my eyes vacant, my mind shattered. But I was never truly there. I was a prisoner of my own fears, trapped in a living nightmare from which I might never awaken. The whispering never stopped. It was always there, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within the walls of Ashwood Asylum. "You'll never leave Ashwood," it whispered. "You'll never be free." And yet, there were moments when the whispering grew faint, when the shadows seemed to recede, and the air felt thick with an eerie silence. It was as if the asylum itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to stir, something to awaken. One day, a new patient arrived at the asylum. A young woman, barely out of her teens, with a look of determination in her eyes. She was placed in the room next to mine, and I watched her through the narrow slit in the door, a glimmer of curiosity stirring within me. As the days passed, I saw her trying to adapt to the asylum's cruel regime. I saw her struggling to hold on to her sanity as the darkness closed in around her. And I knew that I had to warn her, to tell her the truth about Ashwood Asylum and the horrors that lurked within its walls. But the whispering was always there, reminding me that I was trapped, that I would never be free. And so, I kept my silence, watching as the young woman succumbed to the same darkness that had consumed me. The last time I saw her, she was curled up in a ball, her eyes vacant, her mind shattered. The whispering had claimed another victim, and I knew that I was not alone in my madness. The darkness closed in around me once again, and I was gone, lost in a sea of terror and despair. But the whispering continued, echoing through the corridors of Ashwood Asylum, a reminder that the horror was never truly over. And in the depths of the asylum, where the shadows were darkest, a new voice began to whisper, a soft, raspy voice that seemed to be coming from all around. "You'll never leave Ashwood," it said, over and over again. "You'll never be free." Before I bid you farewell, I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for watching this video and being a part of our journey. Your support means the world to me, and I'm truly humbled by the time you've taken to engage with our content. As I reflect on the haunting tale of Ashwood Asylum, I'm reminded that even in the darkest of times, there's always a glimmer of hope. And I believe that's what our channel is all about, exploring the human experience, confronting our deepest fears, and finding the courage to overcome them. If you've been moved by this story, or if you're simply looking for a community that shares your passion for the unknown, then I invite you to join us on this journey. Subscribe to our channel and get ready to dive into a world of mystery, suspense, and intrigue. By subscribing, you'll not only be supporting our mission to create thought-provoking content, but you'll also be joining a community of like-minded individuals who are passionate about exploring the unknown. You'll get access to exclusive videos, behind-the-scenes insights, and a chance to participate in our discussions and Q&A sessions. So, if you're ready to embark on this journey with us, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Your support means everything to me, and I promise you that we'll continue to push the boundaries of storytelling and exploration. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to sharing more stories with you in the future. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.